Hello out there. Happy hump day. 2-5 is here. Sports reports is ordered. Got some business to tend to. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate. Do all the free things. Do all the good things. So, of course, last night, Mr. Logical and I got together. We talked about these here college football rankings, the playoff rankings. You know what I'm saying? And, we had a conversation about it. I gave some reaction. But now that I've had a chance to sleep on it, I got some other things on my mind. Like, for example, right? What does head-to-head mean? I thought of head-to-head as you line up against somebody, you beat them, therefore you get closer to the front of the line. Now, I know it's not always peaches and cream. There's times where you might be number 3, they might be number 5. You lose to an unranked team, so you fall behind them in that scenario. That's not what we're talking about here. And, of course, what is a loss? How much does a loss hurt you? Does a loss hurt you more than a good win helps you? Or a perceived good win, because who knows if it's a good win or not? It just depends on what the committee's trying to accomplish, I guess. So I say that because I look at these rankings and I look at Ole Miss in front of Georgia at 9 and 10, right? That makes sense to me. Georgia in front of Tennessee at 11 makes sense to some degree. I'll get back to that. You got SMU ahead of BYU 13 and 14 respectively, even though BYU not only beat SMU, BYU went into Dallas and won that game, into Gerald Ford Stadium. So when I look at that, I think of BYU being high last week. They lost to unranked Kansas. They had to be punished, so they dropped 8 spots. What's the difference between dropping them 7 spots and leaving them in front of the team that they beat in that scenario? So the reason that I brought up Tennessee in particular is because I don't understand how Bama is up at 7. Now, stay with me now, because the committee tells us that they start this over every week. It's a new ranking every week. So this is why I bring this up. So when I look at Bama, they beat Georgia, but then they lost to Vanderbilt. They nearly lost to South Carolina. They lost to Tennessee. Georgia lost to Ole Miss, but went into Texas and won. But Georgia also lost at Alabama. Tennessee lost at Georgia this past weekend, but beat Alabama earlier this season. So here's my question. This is where we tie the bow around it. So Tennessee closes the season with Vanderbilt, right? Vanderbilt's in Nashville. Makes sense. So they close the season. Bama being at 7 right now, Tennessee at 11. If Tennessee whoops Vanderbilt, do they retroactively go back in front of Bama? Because not only did they beat Bama, but they beat the other team that Bama lost to? That makes sense to me. But that's where it gets all convoluted, because you got Georgia and Ole Miss in the way. Bama beat Georgia. Ole Miss beat Georgia. What do you do with it? Now, the forgotten team in this whole SEC scenario is Texas A&M. 1 conference loss, right? They got whooped, destroyed down in Columbia, South Carolina, coming off of a big win against LSU. They got a game this weekend in Jordan-Hare. I've been picking Auburn all week to win that game. But what if A&M wins? Then you set up a big monumental matchup against the Longhorns next week at home, Kyle Field. What if A&M wins that game? What happens then? Because looking at the rankings right now, Texas is number 3, A&M is number 15. So Georgia and A&M would both have a win over the team that's currently number 3. But they're going to fall, obviously, if they lose that game. So Bama moves up, obviously. But what do? So we're stuck in this mode of what have you done lately? So, for example, Bama, we talked about, lost to Vanderbilt. Bama lost to Tennessee. But that was weeks ago. Tennessee just lost to Georgia this past weekend. So there's the recency bias in there where you got to punish Tennessee for losing recently. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that if you tell me that's what you're doing. But what the committee says is we do this every week and we consider your whole profile when we make these rankings, right? So when you look at Georgia, you can't fault Georgia, right? They lost to Ole Miss. They lost to Bama. That's number 7 and number 9. Both of those were on the road. They also went to Texas where they whooped Texas by 15 points. So now you look down here at South Carolina at number 18. Just imagine if South Carolina had competent referees for their game against LSU. 2 pick sixes overturned by penalties hitting the quarterback who is not a quarterback during an interception return. Now, obviously, one of them, I don't remember if it was Stewart or Kennard, but one of them laid Nussmeier out. That's just stupid. But what about the other pick six? So we would be having a real crazy conversation if that result didn't flip. We've been talking about Army. What if Army beats Notre Dame in Yankee Stadium this weekend? What do you do then? Because you already got Boise at number 12. They threw UNLV in the ranking at 24 because otherwise Boise didn't have a ranked win. Even though Colorado State is undefeated in the Mountain West right now, 3-point underdogs at Fresno this weekend, I still think they win that game. And if so, and they get to the Mountain West title game, you just got UNLV in there taking up space. But then you're going to have to add Colorado State in as well. So then Boise will have 2 top 25 wins. I'm just saying. The Big 12's a mess. Clemson's still down here at 17. They're finished with their ACC schedule right now. So they're sitting back waiting for Miami to slip against Wake or Syracuse, right? Waiting for SMU to slip against Virginia or Cal, because as is, Clemson is the odd man out because of their loss to Louisville. Both SMU and Miami beat Louisville. So 3-way tie, Clemson, you're the weakest link. Goodbye. That's the ACC for you. You still got Missouri here in the rankings, and I wonder why. Is it because Bama's at 7? Is it because A&M is sitting there at 15? Because that's one of A&M's big signature wins. The other one, the aforementioned LSU Tigers, who are not present in these rankings. So A&M has to win that game against Texas to get to the SEC championship game. But what happens? Who loses in the SEC championship game? What if A&M beats Texas, gets to the SEC title game, loses a close game to Georgia or Bama? What do you do then? Because you have to reward the team that made the SEC championship game, don't you? But if that's the case, then you got to honor Tennessee's win against Alabama. And that's where it gets tricky for me, folks. So, of course, Thursday night football, we got an AFC North battle. The Steelers against the Browns. Now, this is one of those games that I look forward to every year because if you ever watch Sports Reports as Ordered or kept up with 2-5 Daily, I'm all about the rivalry. Whether that's NBA, Lakers, Celtics, whether that's college football, NFL, so on and so forth. Even though I hate both the Yankees and the Red Sox, that's what it is, right? So we look at this game out in Lake Erie. And if this was last year, it would be awesome because the Steelers right now, 8th in total defense. The Browns defense last year was top 3 and then, fell apart in the playoffs and they haven't recovered. Or is the Browns defense actually still good But you had Deshaun Watson at quarterback going 3 and out, turning the ball over. So the defense is exposed on the field all day long, right? There was a game against Philadelphia, for example, earlier this year, where Deshaun Watson actually went, I think it was 11 for 11 in the second half. But then on a 4th and goal, they got stopped. That was the game. So Cleveland's defense kept them in the game up until that point. Cleveland is second to last, so 31st in the league in points per game at 16.2. 16 is a magic number because that's what the Ravens scored against the Steelers this past Sunday. The Steelers won that game without scoring a touchdown, 18-16. Emotions are going to be high. Nick Chubb, this is his first game against the Steelers since that unfortunate, nasty injury on Monday Night Football last year. In that game with Deshaun Watson, the Steelers still needed 5 turnovers to get out of there, to get out of Cleveland. Come back later in the season, Cleveland actually beats Pittsburgh. So this is by no means a gimme for Pittsburgh. You know, Myles Garrett has been chirping, saying that he can't wait to play against T.J. Watt. Only problem is he doesn't play against T.J. Watt. You know what I'm saying? They're never on the field at the same time. But here we are. T.J. Watt, 7.5 sacks. Myles Garrett, 7. Defending Defensive Player of the Year. A lot of people felt like it should have been T.J. Watt. A lot of people feel like it might be T.J. Watt this year, even though Trey Hendrickson from the Bengals leads the league in sacks. So what do we do with this? Jameis Winston in relief of Deshaun Watson. First game came in and beat up the Ravens. Game-winning touchdown, you know, with a minute or so left. What happened since then? We look back last weekend, his return home against the Saints, 35-14. So this is a gut check game for the Browns, and not from the standpoint of making the playoffs because that's gone. They're out of there, you know, so you can't make the playoffs, but this is the team that you hate. It's your field, your running back that hurt himself against this team. So what do I expect? I expect the Pittsburgh Steelers to send a lot of pressure, make Jameis Winston get rid of the ball a half second earlier than he wants to. And in the NFL, we know that a half second makes a world of difference, right? You know, Amari Cooper's gone, so you're relying on Jerry Jeudy, who Stephen Smith Jr. told us how he felt about that. You know, he's just a guy. You know, you got Cedric Tillman out there. Jameis seems to have a rapport with him, so maybe you can open up the pass game if you're effective running. This is where Nick Chubb comes in. He says it's just another game. I don't believe him. This is the team that you almost ended your career against last year. Maybe that's hyperbole, but that's how I feel when I saw that injury. So salute to him for being back. But this is it, man. This is where you gut check and say, we hate the Steelers. We want to spoil their season, and you bring your best effort. Now, the Steelers, on the other hand, you know, Najee Harris has been effective this year. Even though he's only averaging 4 yards per carry, he's been getting tough yards. He's been doing just enough to where Russell Wilson can get that moon ball out of his hand. You know, George Pickens is showing that he's one of the best wide receivers in the league. They picked up Mike Williams, and while he's on the field, he's an addition. Hopefully he can stay on the field. So I'm going to call this game, and I know the Steeler fans are going to be mad at me, but this is going to be a knuckle dragging, rock fight, back against the wall, throw across the room, get back up, bite somebody game. And I'm going to take the Steelers to win, but I'm talking 13-9, you know, 16-12, something along those lines. It's going to be a nasty game. The one advantage that I feel Cleveland does have in this game is the fact, not, you know, of course it's a short week, but they both got a short week. But the fact that the Steelers played Baltimore on Sunday, that physical matchup to turn right back around and play another division game against a team that hates you more than they love themselves, it's going to be tough. But give me the Steelers. And then finally, we got some football in the ACC. You got the NC State Wolfpack traveling to Bobby Dodd Stadium for senior night to play against Georgia Tech. Both teams coming off a bye, but two different ways. The last time we saw NC State, they were losing at home to Duke, CJ Bailey throwing for 184 yards, right? But CJ Bailey wasn't supposed to be the quarterback this year. That was Grayson McCall transferring in from Coastal Carolina. People like me thought that NC State was going to make a move up the ACC standings. But here we are, 10 games into the season, and Grayson McCall is retired and called it a career. So NC State is facing an uphill battle if they want to make a bowl game, because they're 5-5 right now. So they need to either win this game or they go to Chapel Hill next week in what might be Mac Brown's last game as North Carolina's head coach due to retirement or stepping away. So to keep that in mind. Georgia Tech, the last time we saw them, they were taking down the Hurricanes. They turned Miami into a tropical depression. The problem for Georgia Tech, though, coming into this game, 77th in the nation against the pass. The good news for Georgia Tech is that they hold on to the ball. Only 6 turnovers the whole season. Even though 4 of those 6 turnovers were in their last 2 losses. So keep that in mind. Now, Georgia Tech has Haynes King at quarterback, who's going to be a nightmare for the Wolfpack defense because there's no Peyton Wilson at linebacker this year. So they're going to run the ball. Jamal is going to run the ball down their throat. Going to be a lot of that. So when I look at this game, it comes down to one simple thing. Can NC State generate enough points to keep up? So I looked at the spread. I saw Georgia Tech favored by 8.5. Okay? Now, with that being said, Georgia Tech is going to grind the clock, chew it up. Brent Pry, former offensive lineman, now the head coach of his alma mater, just going to run the football. NC State can't do anything about it. But I'm going to give NC State a fighting chance just because of Georgia Tech's pass defense. And here's a question for you. If you're Georgia Tech or if you're NC State, would you rather play Georgia Tech coming off this bye after beating Miami and everybody smooching up to them? Or would you rather have faced them the week after beating Miami where they're full of themselves? I think it's the latter. You want to catch them after the Miami game, the same way South Carolina caught Texas A&M after the LSU game. So I'm going to go with Georgia Tech to win the game. I'm going to take NC State to cover. Let's call it 30-23. That's what we'll call it. So I will be back with Mr. Logical on Friday night with more NFL and college football picks. I already gave you Auburn over Texas A&M as one of my upsets. Keep your eye on Minnesota and Penn State, but we'll save all that for Friday. You know what I'm saying? Just teasing you a little bit. It is what it is. I'm 2-5. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate. Do all the free things. Do all the good things.